Hi, everybody. This is Emily Ullman, and I am here chatting with Matt Miesnieks, who is the CEO of a new venture called Deja Vu. And I am so excited to talk to Matt about this new venture because it feels like Matt is back. And we're so excited, of course, in the industry to see what Matt has been doing for the last stretch of time. But of course, it seems like you've come back, Matt, with a big problem to solve, which many of us, as soon as we put on the Apple Vision Pro, we realized there's a fidelity issue with not with content not created by Apple or curated by Apple, and everybody is scrambling to upres their media. What did you do, and how did you get to this point? And welcome. I'm so glad to be here with you
Yeah,
today.
thank you, thank you. I mean, Deja Vu is a pretty exciting idea that I'm working on, and some friends are working on it with me. But yeah, you're right. The company's called Deja Vu because we want to sort of create that sense of places that feel so real that you've been there before when you go to the virtual place. But the inside joke is that you're right. I feel like I'm doing the same idea again and back doing the same thing. So for some of us, it feels like it's just the job itself is deja vu. So it's a nice feeling. But yeah, what we're I think inspired us to start the company, or the problem that we saw that you alluded to, was that the Vision Pro, when it came out, the screens on it was so high resolution. There are more pixels on that thing, and that little device, than there is in an IMAX movie. And as soon as you've got that sort of fidelity, the 3D content that people may have created for the Quest, or for video games, on a PC or a phone, it shows up the flaws in that stuff. And Apple invested millions in the content, like the system environments and some of the in-house content that they created to show really what the device can do. And I thought there was an interesting way to solve that problem, and give content creators a way to sort of max out the device without without having to invent new technology themselves.
Right. And just to make sure that people understand what we're talking about 14K, right? So 7K per eye, 23 million pixels in the device. I mean, according to your pitch, which I saw after you just finished this accelerator with
Yeah,
A16Z. And so you came out of what I would say is stealth, and you have been working on this going, okay, this is a big, big problem, and people don't have an easy way right now to get that IMAX quality imagery, which obviously also takes, in addition to many, many months, it takes millions of dollars, or hundreds of thousands of dollars that people, and especially indie creators, would never have. So tell me, or maybe you can explain to me exactly what this is, because I know that at 60.ai you were hyper focused on persistent AR. You were hyper focused on segmentation and occlusion and all these things, which we of course saw when you were acquired by Niantic with your company. And now I'm trying to understand, how is this different? And what since it is a bit of a deja vu, what is different this time around, and what exactly are people going to be able to do with this?
yeah. Well, it's the same thread, which is around how do you get the virtual world and the real world to kind of intersect, and how does that happen? That apart from like a completely fantastical virtual world. So 6D AI was really some technology that we pushed down onto phones, to really help the phone understand the world, so that it could know where it was in space, it could remember where things were, it could sort of understand things in 3D on regular phones. One of the, I guess, learnings from that was that if you were going to represent to a user that this is a virtual thing that's a copy of the real thing, the real place, consumers just expected it to look perfect. We're used to
Mm-hmm.
photos, we're used to videos, and just we subjectively understand that there's a difference between a photo and a video game. They look different, and so a video game that looks like I don't know, like a Formula One track, um, we see that as a video game. But if someone shows us a film or a photograph of a Formula One track, we go, oh, that's the real place. So,
Hmm.
we learnt that from 6D, and there really was no way to address that today. The only way to do, photorealism back then was in film, with CGI. And since that time, like 4 years ago, Native was acquired, there was a whole bunch of new technology sort of came out of research around things like NERFs and Gaussian
Hmm.
splats, and they let phones start to do captures that looked like videos. They were photoreal, and I got all excited about those and what that might mean, and looked into that technology as a possible solution. But problem was they worked great on phones, but I knew that no one really gets immersed in phones. They're not. They've never been a really great solution for AR. And devices like the Quest, which was the best there was at the moment, still looked like a game. The resolution of the screens wasn't quite high enough to be truly photoreal.
Hmm.
And so when Apple launched the Vision Pro with those displays, it looked like a video, it looked like a photo, and there was obviously no screen door effect, but the resolution was so high you could read text, and photos looked like photos. And
Hmm.
what Apple did was they found a way to make those 3D scenes um, really at the same quality as visual effects studios did it for movies, like they did for Dune or any recent Avengers movie, any of those things. And they managed to get that quality of virtual 3D content and bring it into the device and make it perform. And that was kind of incredible. But the problem was those scenes are such big files; they're
Hmm.
100 gigabyte plus, to
Yeah.
create them. And to get them to run on, like, if you want that sort of content to run on even on a gaming PC, let alone a mobile phone, you need to hire a team of tech artists, 3, 4, 5 artists working for a few months to optimize that scene down, like to a smaller mesh, lower quality textures, baked in lighting, and it all needs to be done by hand just so that it looks good. And
Sure.
that ends up costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, to do that. Um, what we've built with Deja Vu is a way for us to take that scene in its full raw file form and run it through our engine and give it back to you as a runtime that will work at that full photoreal resolution and run on any device. So that's the kind of little technical breakthrough, I guess, that we've sort of built the company around to solve that specific problem that so many creative studios, other OEMs are wrestling with it. AAA game studios, how do they get their content onto lots of devices and still look good? And it's an 8-week-old company, and we're just struggling to keep up at the moment. It's a really nice problem to have.
Got it. So, because my background is in reality capture, my immediate thoughts about this was, okay, right now, if I wanted to not even make volumetric video, like nothing even that advanced, like I'm imagining some of the, environments that you're in when you enter into the Apple Vision Pro, and we'll just use the Apple Vision Pro, I think, as the
Yeah.
example because it's the leader of the pack, right?
Yep. Yep.
And everything else might still have that screen door effect, or it might still have a little bit of pixelation, but we're building for the greatest and the best
Yep.
display at the time, right? Or current display.
Yep.
So as a creator of content, one of my thoughts was, all right, so I get my pano head out. I get a DSLR. I'm shooting a gigapixel. I have extremely high fidelity. And then it's always the question of when I'm basically either compressing the file or I'm, making that file lighter weight, am I going to lose fidelity? Now, you're talking about this for 3D scenes. And so I guess I'm trying to make the connection between, like, walk me through where somebody is going from, say, a 360, high res 360, to what you're describing as a 3D environment. Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of different, there are a lot of different definitions along the way. And I think sometimes we get tripped up in, well, what is 3D? Like, what
Yeah.
exactly are we talking about? So I'd like to understand it, and especially vis a vis nerfs and splats, because of course those can be rooms, those can be geometric spaces, they'll have geometry,
Yeah.
but oftentimes, like, the best things that we've seen in headsets are objects. They're smaller.
Mhm.
They're not actually like a scene itself that we can then, you know, move through. So can you walk me through that, please?
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple of parts to the answer there. So the first difference is just that that 360 look around. Most people have probably experienced something like that with a company like Matterport that creates content for real estate, sales. So if you're looking to buy a house or rent an apartment or something, they'll say like 3D walkthrough, and you click on that thing, and then you get like a nice look around where you can scroll around and look at the apartment, and then you like hop to the next spot where they've got another 360 thing, and it kind of feels like you're just teleporting your way around the place. Um, those are kind of state of the art at the moment, like in terms of what's out there. The reason Matterport's using that is their cameras also have the ability to create a 3D model of the house. Like, I think they call it a dollhouse view, and
The mesh, yeah, they use
yeah,
the
like a
mesh to
mesh.
create the dollhouse view.
Yes,
Exactly.
and it just doesn't look as good as the photos. And so people don't really, use those as much, or they're not the sort of main reason people use that service.
Yeah, sometimes it's
Um,
actually, not to interrupt, but sometimes it's also a detractor, right?
it
Because the
is, yeah,
artifacting, right? I'm really familiar with this particular use case because the artifacting is actually like, I've had clients even say like, the house looks bombed out. What's going on? And
yeah,
then they're like, let's get rid of the dollhouse because we want it to look
exactly.
photoreal. And I think you're really correct about that. And then also, some, as we were limited previously with certain versions of the camera, also being able to scan indoors versus outdoors also gives us a different perspective on where does the scene end.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, it's no special insight on my part. I learned this because Airbnb told me when I was at 6D, and
Right.
they were looking at using our tech there for pushing it out into their app for all the hosts to scan the houses. And what they found was that those 3D scans resulted in lower sales conversions, of
Mm-hmm.
people renting a place,
Mm.
because people wanted to see the dream. They didn't want to see the actual 360 perfect, model of the place. And so, my takeaway was that until those 3D models looked as good as a photograph, they were always going to be, you know, not really useful, to creators. And it's exactly the same situation, whether it's a real estate preview or a hotel or Airbnb, something like that, or a video game manufacturer, or someone trying to make an indie film using the same sort of content, or someone trying to create an environment to do a training simulation of some construction project or something. Um, and it was the same problem all around. Like, if you wanted to be able to freely move around instead of just like hopping from place to place, if you actually wanted to start to make changes to the scene, change the colors on the wall, or you wanted to maybe a slider from like morning to evening to see how the light moves around that
Mm-hmm.
apartment.
Mm-hmm.
You need a 3D model to do that, and the 360 panoramas just don't support it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was excited by the potential of the 3D models, but knew that to get them to look that good, there were two problems to solve, I guess. First was, and I'll do the second one first. The second problem was, once you've got a perfect 3D model of the location, um, how do you make that render? How do you load that into a mobile device or a web browser and make it look good? How do you move around inside it? It looks perfect. That's the first problem that we've solved with Dejavu. And but that presumes that the 3D model, like the artwork, already exists. Um, Fortunately, today, lots of companies have that artwork. They're usually very high-end creative studios, visual effects
Mm-hmm.
studios, AAA game studios, even OEMs. So they're our first sort of customer, prospects. Um, but the first problem, which I'm describing second, is how do you how do you make it easy to capture and create a model that's that high quality? Today, your options are, hire a visual effects team for 6 months and pay them $2 million to $10 million they will, do dedicated captures. They'll spend months like pushing pixels and making sure everything is perfect, but they can do it, but it's a lot of money and a lot of time. You could, maybe you've got the CAD files of the place that you build, like maybe it's a big oil rig or something. You can take those CAD files as the input, artwork 3D model. AAA game studios have got their environments for their games. That's exactly the same process of visual effects. Or nowadays, you can actually generate, AI can just do a straight up text to 3D scene. It's not going to be perfectly real. It'll be somewhat hallucinated, but yeah, it can look good. Or you've then got to take this huge step, like downward in quality, where you get to, Luma AI or Polycam or something that can do it in real time on a phone for free. It does something really good, but it's really good for a phone. It's not headset, like perfect headset quality. And then sort of off to the side, you've got companies like Matterport that have got their own hardware, but their solution is 10 years old or something. They started doing that.
Yeah, 2014, 2013. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
old.
something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, originally the first prototypes for sure. It was like
Yeah, back
Connect,
then.
right?
Yeah, exactly. It was Connect. So they've improved it a bit since then, but it's still got challenges. So what we're doing next with Deja Vu is we want to build a pipeline sort of above Matterport but below a visual effects team, or basically try and automate that work that the visual effects team have done. And in that sense, we're going to replicate some of the things we were doing at 6D, but instead of using a phone, we'll say, look, just go and get an off-the-shelf DSLR camera, or
I see.
reasonably
Okay.
spend maybe 20 grand or something on some off-the-shelf camera equipment. Go and film everything in like 4K at 120 frames a second and get a really good capture of the place, of the raw data.
Can I pause you there just to make sure I understand? You're not talking then photogrammetry where we're capturing? It's video, right? You'll be doing video capture.
So I mean, different words for all the same thing. You take frames from an image sensor. Like obviously video is just capturing them really fast, faster than
frames.
you can press the button. And you take a whole bunch of those frames, you figure out their pose, relative to each other, and then you feed that into a 3D reconstruction pipeline. Photogrammetry is just kind of one approach to 3D reconstruction. There's sort of a million different ways to kind of come at that, but it's all kind of under the same umbrella of taking in some image data and maybe some metadata and turning that into a 3D model at the end of it. And photogrammetry is, again, like this, it's kind of an umbrella term for lots of different ways to take lots of photos. So it's usually, what we found again with 6D, like from a user experience, it's kind of easier for people just to record a video than it is to, take the right number of photos from the right places. And so we want to just be able to take in, data that's higher quality than a phone. And then on the reconstruction side, what's new recently is a lot of the problems with, photogrammetry or 3D reconstruction are things like, I don't know, like a bird flies across the background or a cloud goes over the sun, and all of a sudden, a white wall is white here and it's a little bit different white here, and you've got to kind of somehow correct all that sort of stuff. Or some, maybe you missed the back of the kitchen counter, because you just forgot to walk over there and scan that. And a lot of those point problems can now be solved by generative AI or diffusion models. And we think that, for a budget of sort of now 50 to 100K, you can get something that's going to be like 95 to 99% as good as what a visual effects team can do. And it'll still be a, multi-gigabyte output file, way too big for a phone, way too, difficult to even look at on a PC. But we've got the rendering engine that can just ingest that and make it something that works.
Got it. Okay. So, right. So I'm seeing this sort of this space between the, like you said, between Matterport and between the visual effects teams. And it reminds me actually, Matt, of a time not too long ago during the pandemic
Yeah,
when companies like Netflix, right, were in a panic over they had some productions that had paused because they weren't able to shoot during the pandemic, during
yeah,
lockdown. And then some of these projects were actually shooting on location where they couldn't go back because that building, what for whatever reason, was going to be demolished, or it was just not available to them later. And so it suddenly became extremely important for the digital twinning of these locations for virtual production, right? So it's like I see the arc of how it goes
yeah.
from, because Matterport just wasn't good enough, right?
No,
And
exactly.
yet the expertise that you needed, and also the equipment and the premiums that these companies are being charged for the digital twinning of those locations as this like backup, right? I mean, from what I understand, for many of the studios, that's step one now, is that
Yep.
you start your project with a digital twin, and
Yeah.
you wouldn't conceive of doing it any other way. So then it sort of makes me think, okay, well, I saw the problem back then. Of course, there wasn't a solution for that except for going into the, big investment
Yeah.
of, like you said, visual effects team and really heavy duty scanning. And so now it sounds like with the higher fidelity capture of a DSLR, with the render pipeline, you're able to then package it up as a solution for any of these creative studios, for the game studios, and then, or even for the game studios. And I mean, and in many ways, right, the production and the gaming engines, like they've all sort of
It's all
become
becoming the same
closer.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the same thing now.
Yeah.
I think even of oh, it's a different topic, but I think about Epic Games and capturing, is it capturing reality or
Yeah. Reality capture. Yeah.
reality capture, right? Thank you. So reality capture, which again, like, that requires like quite a bit of computer
Yeah.
expertise to be able to like bring your content in, to be able to work
Yep.
with large files, to be able to perfect them, set the pose or set everything
Yeah.
perfectly. And that's not something that anybody could just jump right into without
No,
like a
exactly.
basic knowledge, basic baseline of knowledge.
Yeah.
So I see the incredible value, and I also see where the industry did pause. Like in a way, there was like, we saw that on the higher end outputs, people didn't keep going. They kind
Yeah.
of got stuck there, and there is a big gap. So it's cool that you recognize that. But I think you bring up a nice point on like Polycam, Luma, these more like fun, easy to use cell
Yeah.
phone experiences. So that's where I was curious, because I was like, okay, is this, as cell phones get as good as DSLRs, is there then again like another trajectory where the
Not.
phone is
Yeah.
eventually used?
Eventually, but it'll be a while. The issue comes with like how far away is the thing you're trying to capture from the phone, and what happens is that the image sensors on those phones are, they're quite small, even though they're very
Sure.
dense, and it becomes like a trigonometry problem. Because if you've got, say you zoom into your image sensor, if you've got like a pixel here and a pixel here on your sensor, and you've got one, dot off in the distance that you're trying to capture, a leaf on a tree or something, at some point that angle between the pixels at the bottom gets so tight that it just thinks it's the same thing, because
Mm,
the number of decimal points of precision on that angle just gets too small, and it just gives an error. Um,
got
where
it.
you need it with a bigger image sensor and a bigger lens, it actually keeps that space, and it's able to actually calculate that, oh, this leaf is distinct from the background, so I can actually make that look good, because I've got literally just a physically bigger image sensor.
Absolutely. Right.
So
I mean, the bigger is the sensor, and of course that would it help with a lot of things like
yeah,
low lighting, or it would
absolutely,
help
yeah,
it would low lighting environments. I think that that's also the biggest thing coming from the photography side of things, that you're
yeah,
like, you're always anxious that you're going to be introducing noise to your
Yes.
data, which we can resolve, of course, with some AI, but is it really as good? So, you want to have the best stuff go in, the first time around.
Yeah, I mean the AI can't actually help if you just got a pixel on the screen and one sensor gives you one pixel and a better sensor says it's 2 pixels, then the AI can actually distinguish if there's 2 pixels there. So everything ultimately comes back to that raw, the raw sensor that you're using to capture it.
Hmm.
So that's why we're consciously not going after a phone-based approach. Just because from talking to these studios, they need it that good, and it can't be
Yeah.
done on a phone today.
I get it. I think that makes perfect sense. So we've talked a little bit
Hmm,
about real estate. We've talked a little bit about the gaming studios. We flashed back a little bit to what you were doing with 60 and Niantic, and I wanted to sort of take another question and draw it out, and which is that you talked about this in your pitch as being this wedge. And I think
yep.
that that's an interesting metaphor because, you talk about the mirror world as well. And I know that people have asked you already. I was looking at some of your Twitter threads recently. I was like, oh yeah, people are like, but Matt, where's AR Cloud? Where does this all fit in? And so I think that if we go back to sort of the top of the conversation, we are talking about that thread. And
Yeah.
so I'd love it if you could break down a little bit more like what is that 2025 vision of the mirror world? What does that look like? And how is this going to get us even further into our
Yeah. Yeah.
immersive content so that it
It's
really does feel like deja vu?
yeah. Yeah. It's funny. This is like one of the trickiest questions, as we're fundraising at the moment. So, on one hand, you can tell a story about a big vision of where the world's going, but then you get asked, well, what's the specific application that you're going to get traction with today? What's the problem that this solves?
Hmm.
And on the flip side, we talk about the specific problem that it solves, and it's who, and then they're like, oh, you're just going to be a feature of Unreal Engine. Where does this won't go anywhere? And that's just part of an entrepreneur's frustration of dealing with investors because they, that's what they do. Um, but how I'm kind of seeing it is, definitely focusing on a problem that can be solved and that people will pay for or companies will pay for today, which is that rendering solution. But if that's all we did and that's all we plan to do, yeah, we will end up as a feature of Unreal Engine or of Unity or something, and it'll be worthless in some years from now. So the next thing we're doing after the rendering engine is building that pipeline that I talked about to capture scenes and driving that cost down from millions to tens of thousands. Not only to make it easier for the creative directors at Netflix to create their virtual sets, or for AAA game studios to drop the cost of creating their game environments, but actually to open up new markets. Ad agencies that want to put a virtual Mercedes Benz in a forest, to show it off, or real estate agents that want to a better solution than Matterport for a similar price. And that's where we want to build that, to be able to just open that funnel and increase the amount of 3D data that we're bringing onto our platform. And at that point, we start to become less of a tool and more of a destination. It's where we start hosting these scenes on our server and putting basically straight up gaming tech underneath them to
Hmm.
turn them into multiplayer games. So at the moment, I keep going back to the Matterport real estate use case because
Hmm.
most people are familiar with that. Is at the moment, if you want to tour a house, say I want to tour it with my partner and with my broker, all of us are on our PCs, all of us are clicking around independently. And it's like, what room are you in? What room are you in? There's no coordination. It's literally a single player experience, and it's not really immersive either. Where what we want to do is say, look, we'll all just log into this and we'll enter it, either with avatars or with a first person view. And I might have a headset on, you might just be on your browser. My broker might be over there with a Quest, headset on, and we can all see each other as if we're in a video game, except it's the house that we're looking at buying. And we can all walk around together and we can talk and share. You know, we can then start changing wall colors, changing the time of day, changing furniture, and really get that, you know, really kind of lift that experience of, you know, what it's like to be in this place.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that step where we start making these places like interactive destinations, and we start sort of starting to publish like a layer of tooling on top of the places.
Yeah.
So, you know, so that the agents can give you the tools to change the wall colors or change the, you know, the time of day. Then these places start to become applications. You know, that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, here's one for real estate. Maybe, you know, there's a furniture, you know, the cliche use cases. Maybe there's furniture companies that want to make
Oh,
it
the virtual staging.
a
Mm-hmm.
retail thing for virtual staging. Maybe it's, you know, there's definitely the, you know, Defense Department are looking at applications that are more around training and simulation for, you know, for missions. So instead of it being a, you know, changing the wall color, they could put random people through the scene, you know, and you've got to interact with them appropriately. That type of stuff is, you know, all could be in this house we're looking to buy. Like I could run a, you know, SEAL Team 6 mission training, you know, how to rescue hostages from the same house.
Yeah.
You're dropping an IKEA couch and wondering whether to buy it. But all of it is, from our point of view, you know, all of these are like 3D data, you know, of real places that we're hosting and making them, you know, available to you that feel photorealistic.
Yeah, I think that, it's funny because I've spent a lot of time in properties doing the scanning
Yeah,
and commercial properties, industrial properties, you name it, lots of residential as well. And I always feel like, by the time I've spent 6 hours in the place, I probably have spent more time in the property, A, than the realtor, and
yeah,
B, than the potential homeowner who now
yep,
doesn't really know what the place feels like from the first thing in the morning until evening. And I always
exactly.
feel like I get this feeling when I leave, like, I really know this place so well. I wish that we could convey all of the time of day shifts, and you're always making these choices around what you're
Yeah,
going to show, right? Like, I want to have the lighting, show the eastern light in the morning, like if I'm in the East Bay, because that means that I'm going to get the sunshine coming in through this window, right?
yeah,
But in the at the end of the day, in the afternoon, the sun comes in from the west, and you
yep,
have your glow of your twilight or your golden hour. And so I think that the time of day, which is really interesting from the gaming perspective, right? Because, lighting
yeah,
is something that is malleable in a gaming
yeah.
environment. And so this idea of turning any kind of scan, and I guess it could be a property, but it could be anything else,
Could be anything.
sort of into this interactive scene where you have parameters, you have some sort of configuration that you can perform. And I like the idea also of people being able to use the location for multiple purposes.
Yeah,
So that's another one of the things with like virtual production right now, where there's like, hey, we've got a catalog of 100
low.
locations,
Yeah,
but you could use this for 1950s, or you could use this
yep,
for an office, or people kind of are like repurposing they're repurposing these virtual locations because the variety doesn't exactly exist yet in
yeah,
the 3D cataloging of the world. Because what we
exactly.
have, and you could even say from 2013 to now 2024, it's not like it's a waste, because Matterport and all these other reality capture efforts have resulted in a tremendous amount of data. But
Yeah,
that data is useless, as you're saying, in an Apple Vision Pro because of the fidelity issue as a 3D
exactly.
model. Like, you can
Yep,
look at it and you can play with it, but
yeah,
you didn't make the leap. You didn't make the resolution leap
yep,
into that environment. And we can look at the panos because they were shot with a camera,
yep, yep.
whatever, like a 134 megapixel image. But it's not the same as like scanning it specifically for that purpose, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's yep. I think you've summed up like very much where we see this going, and that idea of like, a catalog of places that can be used for different things. Like you could license your home to Electronic Arts to be a sort of level of The Sims, and
Yeah.
they could just drop virtual characters in there to play games. So that idea of being the destination where we host all these locations, but then there's like a literally infinite number of use cases that they can be built on top of them, is how we end up not being a checkbox feature in Unreal Engine. We become more like a I don't know, I joke it's something like Roblox, like that.
Yeah.
Roblox is like a platform where there's like millions of little games in there. If we were that for the enterprise, where we're the platform, we're hosting all these millions of little places, and then each of these places has got different sort of practical utility type use cases on top of them.
Yeah, and it starts right with it starts, of course, with having a place that you would actually want to visit where you don't spend
Yeah,
your entire time noticing its flaws. And I feel like every time I've talked to my friends who are game developers, that's sort of where they go with it. They're like, yeah, I could scan it, but I might as well
yeah.
just,
It
I might
looks
as well just build
janky.
it.
There's artifacts. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah. It is.
chunky. And like, yeah, you could
Yep.
be there, but you're not actually there. Like it reduces this feeling of presence. And I think that you're
Absolutely.
trying to have the presence sort of be the natural environment, and that's what we see, of course, with the really beautiful color pass through in the Apple Vision Pro. Like we can read text, like you mentioned, through our phones. Like that type of fidelity is going to enable, of course, the overlay of the really extraordinarily realistic environments. Now I
Yeah,
wonder also, Matt, I'm just pulling this out of thin air, but I'm
yeah,
wondering if a resurgence of the so-called like holy grail of virtual real estate may swing back our way, and people might say, okay, well, Roblox for that's more of a game, but this is real, this feels
yeah,
real.
yeah.
Is that going to maybe be coming back our way? And does that turn into I mean, real estate is the value, I believe, of all real estate is something like $25 trillion, right? So how does that factor into our the world's 4 billion square feet of real estate that exists right now?
Um, look, I don't believe in virtual real estate having value at all. Like I think a virtual copy of the Eiffel Tower will never be worth what the Eiffel Tower is worth. There's only one of those. But there could be an infinite number of scans. And all those people that are like, oh, you can buy our virtual land and own the virtual Eiffel Tower. You're like, well, there could be a million companies like you. So what makes yours worthwhile?
Mm-hmm.
So virtual real estate's only valuable if lots of people go to that virtual place. So it's why Google's homepage is worth a lot of money, and Dejavu's homepage is worth not very much. Um, so, from my point of view, that sense of virtual real estate, you know, I don't believe in that. But what I do think is really interesting is two things. You mentioned that sense of presence. Um, I was definitely surprised when so many people I would try the Vision Pro, like who aren't in this world, and they would just go to one of these locations, like Joshua Tree or the Moon or wherever it was, and they'd just go, "This is awesome," and they'd like sit
Hmm.
there for 20 minutes just looking
Hmm.
around,
Hmm.
and I would be looking at them going, "But that's nothing. Like you can't do
Right.
anything. Like what?" But just that feeling of like chilling out in a place, if it feels good enough, is like interesting to people, and they're happy to do that. So that was kind of one of those like little light bulb moments for me that went, okay, my big vision and all my experience and all that stuff makes me think more sophisticated things are more interesting. But just watching how people behave and what they do respond to made me kind of think, okay, keep it simple and make it really good is something to focus on. Um, and the other thing around virtual real estate, I guess, is that I definitely believe that real places have meaning to people, and the place where you propose to your partner, the place where you caught your first roller coaster, the place where you went on your first date with someone, like these are real places, and they if we can replicate those well enough in the real world. Your grandmother's house where you used to spend time with her, your baby's room where they used to change their diaper when they were little. Like being able to kind of experience meaningful places in the real world and actually get that same emotional reaction in a virtual setting, I think is just an incredibly powerful opportunity to kind of tap into. And I don't really
Mm-hmm.
know what it turns into in terms of products or businesses or anything like that. But if all we're doing is virtually experiencing like virtual synthetic places that you know could be anywhere, could
Yeah.
mean anything, then it won't tap into our real world life experience. It'll only be like, oh, remember when we met in Second Life back in the '90s, and we'll go back to that place in Second Life, but it's different. It's a different thing. So I'm quite curious as to, and this is like a 10-year out thing for us, but that what's that going to unlock when you feel deja vu? You're like, oh my god, I've been here before. This is the place
Mm-hmm.
where this
Yeah.
happened in my real life. And I'm back here. And that's going to be a very strong emotional feeling that we all have. And I think there's some really cool product ideas to kind of explore around that. If we can pull it off.
Absolutely. I think it's already we have the front of that storm. We have it coming
Yeah.
towards us. And I think that most people, again, it's like most people don't use the all of the different features on even their iPhones to do
No.
all the incredible things that they can do with them. Like even if they have spatial video, right? Like they have the iOS and they have
Yeah.
a iPhone that is compatible with shooting spatial video. uh they may not be thinking, and I think that that's one of my most recent experiences with it, Matt, is just it's like, I have to remember right now to
Yeah.
put spatial video capture on, right?
Yeah.
It
Me
has
too.
to be something that you are initiating yourself. And
Hmm.
if, however, you realize there's a payoff there with being able to then share that location or bring it as a souvenir to someone, right?
Yep.
Like I'm bringing you the closest to the Eiffel Tower you will ever be is my creating this thing for you and sharing it with you. And that could be something that you give to your kids or you want to capture that memory. I do think that that's where we are playing in that world right now.
Yeah.
But we do need we need better ways to do it and to share it, and to we
Yep.
always have to be thinking that it might be 10 years away where we'll be able to actually look back and go, oh my gosh, I wish I had shot all of these
Yeah.
moments in my life with the spatial video, with the spatial
Yep.
audio. I'm just thinking iPhone, but of course with Deja Vu, which will increase the presence so that you really feel like you are transported into that moment in time or that
Yep.
location. I do think it's incredibly powerful, and I think it works. In my mind, it works backwards and it also works forwards.
Looks
Like,
forward. Hmm.
yeah, it works forward. So I think it's pretty special.
Yeah.
Um,
That's why,
awesome.
that's what's motivating us to do this, and I think it's what excites like everyone on our team and people we talk to, and it's, so definitely there's a entrepreneurial side that's like, look, we got to get some revenue, we got to get break even, we got to stay alive, we got to close these deals, and we got to solve like today's problem today. Um, but if that was all if that's the only reason that's sort of driving us, then I think we'd get pretty bored pretty quickly or get burnt out pretty quickly. But this idea of, like literally of deja vu, this idea of, the virtual and real sort of becoming indistinguishable in many ways and unlocking lots of different emotions through that is, yeah, that's a lifelong quest, if we get the opportunity to sort of keep pursuing it that long.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you. I know you're talking to some investors now,
Yeah.
and so you've probably got your inbox full. But if you have room for more emails or for more
Yes.
contacts, what would be the best place for people to reach out to you right
Yeah.
now? And yeah, let us know.
Yes, either Matt Miesnieks on Twitter and every other social platform out there, or my email is matt, M-A-T-T, at djv.ai.
Got it. And then the website is also djv.ai. Three
That's it.
letters. You did it
Yep,
again. A short
yep,
URL.
yep.
Everybody doesn't know how you do it every time, but you do. And anyway, so Matt, thank you. It's been absolutely delightful to speak with you today.
Same. Thank you.
Just extraordinary. And I think everyone in the industry is rooting for you, but I would just say that it's really exciting, and it's really exciting to see you, especially because you have such insight into this and you've done it before. And so I hope that Deja Vu is a huge success. And
Thank
thank
you.
you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Really enjoyed the chat.